All right. Our message today comes from the book of Mark chapter 3, verses 7 through 19. So, it is Mother's Day, but I opted to not do a Mother's Day message. I hope you forgive me for that at some point. All right. But I want us to continue to go through Mark. I've been enjoying going through Mark. I hope you guys have been enjoying it too. So we've been looking at Jesus kind of in his ministry, and last week we had kind of talked about it being the end of the real confrontations, at least for now, between Jesus and the leadership of the religious community at the time. And so we've been seeing him do miracles, we've been seeing him do all these wonderful things, and we're going to continue to see some of that. So let's look at Mark chapter 3, verses 7 through 19. But Jesus withdrew with his disciples at the sea, and a great multitude from Galilee followed him, and from Judea, and Jerusalem, and Idumea, and beyond the Jordan, and those from Tyre and Sidon. A great multitude, when they heard how many things he was doing, came to him. So he told his disciples that a small boat should be kept ready for him, because of the multitude, lest they should crush him. For he healed many, so that as many as had afflictions pressed about him to touch him. And the unclean spirits, whenever they saw him, fell down before him and cried out, saying, "You are the Son of God." But he sternly warned them that they should not make him known. And he went up on the mountain and called to him those he himself wanted, and they came to him. Then he appointed 12, that they might be with him, and that he might send them out to preach, and to have power to heal sickness, and to cast out demons. Simon, to whom he gave the name Peter, James, the sons of Zebedee, and John, the brother of James, to whom he gave the name Boanerges, however you pronounce that, all right? That is, sons of thunder. Andrew, Philip, Bartholomew, Matthew, Thomas, James, the son of Alphaeus, Thaddeus, Simon the Canaanite, and Judas Iscariot, who also betrayed him. And they went into a house. Right, so I want to look at that section. It's a little bit longer than we've been looking at. But I think it's all kind of about the same thing. And so I kind of want to cover it all at one point. And the reality is, it's about who Jesus surrounds himself with. Right? There has been many conversations, many things about how Jesus hung out with sinners and tax collectors. Right? And you've heard me say this before, but I want us to see it again, that no, he didn't hang out with them. He ministered to them. Right? He witnessed to them. It's not the same thing as hanging out with them. Right? You see, I hang out with my wife and my kids. I don't hang out with the kids that are at school. My students, we don't get together after school is done. When the workday is over, they see me in Price Chopper, they might say hi, or they might put their head down and go like this, you know? And I actually might prefer it when they put their heads down and go like this, because then we don't have that awkward of, hi, yeah, we're in a different place and we're not normal. Our dynamics has changed, right? We don't hang out. They're not my buddies, they're my students, right? And the reality is that Jesus didn't hang out with these guys. They were the people he ministered to. They were his patients. Were they given the offer to hang out with him? Yes, if they were willing to come and follow him. But they had to make a choice to leave the life they had and to choose a life of following him. Right? And we see that here. In verses 7 through 12, we see Jesus going out to the sea. He's actually withdrawing from the temple. He's withdrawing at this point from the Pharisees who are plotting to kill him. He's withdrawing from the confrontation. And as he withdraws, the crowd follows him. Not because they want to learn from him, not because they want to do what he wants, because they all want something from him. And you know, sometimes in our lives, we're going to have crowds that follow us because they want something from us. And Jesus, as this is happening, has an escape plan. You know, sometimes it's like going over to a family's house. My parents in particular. I don't have an escape plan for my in-laws yet, so because Sarah just keeps talking. But we have escape plans sometimes when we go to my parents' house. All right, and we have this at this point, so we can't stay all day. All right, good, right? Generally, the escape plan is we need to get home to go to bed, but that's because we plan on being there for a while. But we've gone to people's houses and known if we stay, problems will happen, so let's have something else afterwards to get out. And so Jesus has an escape plan. He has a way out. Right? He says, look, guys, have a boat ready for me because there's a lot of people here and they're all going to need stuff and I can't give everybody everything all at once. Right? The reality is the people you hang out with, you can hang out with all the time. The people that you're working with, the ministry, you have an escape plan. You have a way to say, all right, we have to stop now. We have to walk away. We have to disappear. Right? And Jesus had that with the boat. So these aren't the people he hung out with. But when we get to verse 13, it says, and he went up on the mountain, and he called to him those he himself wanted, and they came to him. In other translations, it says, and he called his disciples to him. Right? And oftentimes we think of the 12 disciples. The reality is they're 12 apostles. Right? He had, most scholars believe, about 120 people who faithfully followed him everywhere he went. Right? Which is a small church, bigger than ours, but still a small church in today's standards. And so he had 120 people probably gathered around him at this point. Those are the people he hung out with. Those are the people he spent his time with. Right? Those are the people that he was willing to be completely open and honest with without having to worry too much about. Right? And there's a reason for that. We have several verses about this. Right? 1 Corinthians 15:33 says, do not be deceived. Evil company corrupts good habits. Right? Evil company corrupts good habits. You could go, well, that's just one passage. All right, let's go to 2 Corinthians 6:14-18. Do not be unequally yoked together with unbelievers, for what fellowship has righteousness with lawlessness? And what communion has light with darkness? And what accord has Christ with Belial? Or what part has a believer with an unbeliever? And what agreement has the temple of God with idols? For you are the temple of the living God. As God has said, I will dwell in them and walk among them. I will be their God, and they shall be my people. Therefore come out from among them and be separate, says the Lord. Do not touch what is unclean, and I will receive you. I will be a father to you, and you shall be my sons and daughters, says the Lord Almighty. Right? I like the way they put it there. Come out from among them and be separate. Right? We have a movement in the church, and it's been going on for several years, to be a part of the world. When we're called to be separate from the world. We're called to be in the world, but not of the world. Right? Light and darkness. But when we surround ourselves and we hang out with people who are unbelievers, when our friendships are those who are, as the Bible calls it, evil company, the sinners and tax collectors, we become like them. Right? And this is not just a biblical principle here, which we read in 1 Corinthians. We know this from sociology, right? Anybody who has studied a little bit of sociology understands the process of socialization, right? It's why when you put a good kid in a bad class at school, that good kid ends up becoming bad like the other kids. I know we're not supposed to say there's any such thing as a bad kid, but there are some bad kids, I'm sorry. Generally that they were taught to be that way, but it's why when we send people off to prison, they often come back worse criminals than when they went in. Because they become like the people around them. Right? It's something we know. It's something we've seen. It's why some countries said, you know what, this prison idea doesn't work. We need to actually take these criminals and put them in good homes so that they can socialize with these good people to try to get them to be more like the good people. I don't know how well that works, though, because but again, Proverbs 13:20 says, he who walks with wise men will be wise, but the companions of fools will be destroyed. So what we see in this passage is Jesus surrounded himself with faithful individuals, right? 120 faithful and 12 specific men. 12 specific people that he really hung out with. And if we did a greater study, we would find that Jesus really spent his most precious time with 3 of them. They happen to be the first 3 that are named here: Peter, James, and John. He spent most of his time with Peter, James, and John. When he would retreat, he would generally say, Peter, James, John, you come with me. We're going in a little bit further. Right? He had this inner circle, this tight-knit group. His closest friends were believers. It's interesting that it seems to be harder and harder to find groups of believers to hang out with, to have that tight-knit circle. But the reality is that we should seek that out. Because iron sharpens iron, we become like them. The wisest people I've known in my life have always said, you know, when I go to a new place, I look for the smartest person and I try to hang out with them. I look for the wisest person. Growing up, we moved around a little bit. And my father said, you know, when he would get to a new church, he would look for the wisest, eldest gentleman, and he would hang out with him. Right? And so I can remember guys like Mr. Sharbaugh. That was one of the guys that Dad hung out with. And, you know, Mr. Sharbaugh was one of the guys who encouraged me to go off to seminary. Right? I remember Pastor Boersma, because he was another one of those guys that my father decided to hang out with. He was a retired minister. Right? He surrounded himself with the wise people, with the people who loved God, the people who would help them walk the path of the straight and narrow. It's important for us to find those people in our lives. And Jesus did that. He found those people, and he kept them around him. And they ministered to him as he ministered to them. And so Jesus surrounded himself with these people. But I want you to see something else that I thought was interesting in here. Jesus didn't just surround himself with these people. He made an intentional choice. You know, sometimes I feel like the people we hang out with aren't the people we chose. They're the people we got stuck with, right? Choose the people you hang out with. Choose. Make a choice. So he chose the 12. I also want to draw out this distinction, right? At this point, he's choosing the 12 apostles. We've already seen him call the 12, right? And so I want to draw a distinction between the calling of an individual and the choosing of an individual, right? Because we know that no one can come to the Father unless the Father calls him to him, draws him in, right? I believe that call is a general call. It's given out to everybody Jesus says, come follow me. Not everybody chooses to follow him. And that general call is a call to be one of the 120. But beyond that, he chooses us for specific purposes. Right? These 12 had specific things that they were called to do, that they were chosen to do. I find it interesting that in that 12, we have Peter, who denied Christ 3 times. We have Judas, who betrays him, and it mentions he betrays him. One of the things I find interesting about the Gospels is almost every time they mention Judas Iscariot, they either say something like the traitor or the one who betrayed him. Right? He was still chosen. He had a purpose to serve. Right? We have also been chosen by God. He called us and he chose us. Right? 1 Peter 2:9 says, but you are a chosen generation, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, his own special people, that you may proclaim the praises of him who called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. Right? We have been chosen to proclaim his praises. Right? To tell the world about how great he is. And each of us has been chosen to do that in a different way, in different places, in different sections, right? There are people that you guys know that I don't know. There are people I know that you guys don't know. We have different ways in which we proclaim it, right? I think about the music ministry here. I couldn't do that, right? Everybody knows I don't have any rhythm. If you ask me to actually play the piano for you guys, and wow, we would be so far not knowing what to do, right? God didn't choose me for that. He chose Nancy and Aaron for that, right? He didn't choose everybody to be a preacher, right? He chose me. He chose Trudy for that. But every one of us has been chosen to do something, to proclaim the praises of God in some way, right? We've been called and we've been chosen. And as he talks about choosing the disciples, choosing the apostles, right? He might send them out to preach, right? The word apostle literally means send out. The one sent out, right? And as he chose them to have power, right? He gave them power to heal sickness and to cast out demons. You know, not all of us are given that power, right? There are some who say that power doesn't exist anymore. I don't know. Or that need isn't there anymore. I don't know, right? I believe that he's chosen some people to be doctors, to take care of things. They've chosen. I was not chosen to be a doctor. My hand can't be that steady. If you asked me to cut on somebody, there'd be like a nice zigzag, right? It'd be very jagged. If you asked me to look down their throat, it'd be like, ooh, there's something in there. What is that? Right? But he gave them power to do what he wanted them to do. Right? He has chosen you for a purpose. He has chosen you and given you the ability to do the things that he wants you to do. Right? I find it interesting that oftentimes as we try to witness to people, we witness and we don't feel like we have any power to do so. Right? But no, he has given us the power to do so. He's given us the ability to do so. And sometimes we feel like, well, then why don't I see results? Well, because sometimes the results are subtle and you don't get to notice them. I've been losing some weight, right? Every night I look in the mirror now, and last night Sarah's like, why aren't you looking in the mirror? You do that every night. Because I don't see any difference, right? If I look in every night. Sometimes as we're witnessing, as we're ministering, as we're trying to help people out, we don't see ourselves making a difference. And so we can get discouraged. But he sent us out with power. Each and every one of us is chosen. It doesn't say it here, but it does in other passages, when he sent them out, he didn't send them out alone. Right? And sometimes I know we feel like we're out alone witnessing. We're out alone doing this, trying to share the gospel, trying to proclaim his praises, and we may feel alone. But we're not. We're never alone. And I know some people go, well, yeah, we know that God's always with us. Yeah, but we're not alone as people either. There are other people who are alongside us that we may not even know about, who are witnessing in ways that we don't know about, who are still there. And we have each other here in the church, right? But it goes back to that, who are we choosing to be with us? Right? Sometimes when we minister to people, when we witness to people, we need to be conscious about choosing to bring somebody with us. I know when I have to do visitations, I take my children because they have gifts that I don't, right? They like to talk to people a lot, right? And it's great. And because they're young, people like to listen to them too. They like to hear that they sound wise, right? Or that they're cute little girls. Daniel, you're not a little girl, so you get to be wise, okay? The girls can be wise too, they're just not quite that old yet. When Daniel was little, it was this cute little boys talking to me. And it would light up older people's eyes because, hey, they got this little kid who's just talking away and not shutting up. And, you know. And while he's talking, I'm praying internally because that's where I'm stronger. We choose who we take with us. We choose the group that we spend our time with to complement ourselves, and not compliment as in I'm doing a good job, but compliment as in filling in the holes. Right? I should be specific on that, right? But we also choose those people because they're going to help us to stay focused where we need to be focused. They're going to help us not be crushed. I didn't have room in the bulletin, right? But in the book of James, it says, I think it's James, it may be John, that we aren't to love the world, right? Because the world is against God. There's enmity between the world and God. And that when we love the world, we start to become like it. We start to be crushed by it. We grieve the spirit within us when we start to take on the things that the world is saying is good. We see that in our nation today. When we surround ourselves with other fellow believers, they help us from being crushed there. They help us from wandering astray. They help us to stay on task. They help us to fulfill this position we've been appointed to. This royal priesthood, this holy nation. They help us to continue to be separate, to be his special people, so that we may proclaim his praises, so that we may preach the gospel. We may not be the 12 apostles, but God has still chosen us, and he has empowered us, and he wants us to spend time with each other and with him. Will you bow with me in prayer?